Hello, everyone, and welcome to our University Business Web Seminar here today, which is entitled Expand Enrollment by Improving Digital Equity and Access, which is brought to you by the generous support of our sponsor here today, T-Mobile for Education. Now, before we get started, I would just like to share just a few housekeeping items with you, and then we'll get started right away. If at any time you need any technical support here today, please use the chat panel, which you can find. It's on the lower right side of your screen. Then select on my name, which is Stephen Blackburn, and then just type in your message, and I'll get back to you as quickly as I can. I'm also about to submit a phone number and access code in the chat that you can dial in if you want to listen in privately or if you don't have any speakers, so look out for that as well. We will also be welcoming any questions that you have here today with the Q&A session that will be happening at the end of the presentation here today. You can submit a question by using the Q&A panel, which you can find at the bottom right side of your screen near chat, and then send your questions to all panelists. If for whatever reason you don't see the chat or the Q&A panels, just look again. It's on the bottom right-hand side of your screen. Then just click on the expand triangle, which is directly in front of the panel name, and that will show you if you have access to it. Also, this is the last thing I'm going to say, is that if you would like to access the webinar at a later time, you'll be pleased to know that everyone who is registered and who is attending here today, all of you will receive an email with a link to the slides as well as an archive recording from us at UB at some point tomorrow. And now it is my pleasure to pass things off to the main moderator of today's event, Michael Cubitt, who is the Higher Education Advisor over at our partner at T-Mobile. Thanks, Michael. Great to have you with us here today.
Hey, thank you so much, Stephen. Happy to be here. I just want to take a moment to welcome everyone and to thank each and every one of you for taking time out of your busy schedules to join us today. Really excited to be bringing the topic of expanding enrollment by improving digital equity and access. Why are we bringing this topic? This is really quite an incredible topic, and I'm sure by the end of today's conversation, you'll understand why. So one of the things that we've all experienced on this side of the pandemic is really a realization of how deep and how broad the digital divide really is. So this is a big issue, and it's a big enough issue that we've partnered with University Business and our partners that you'll meet here shortly to really talk about this. So to give you a sense of the scale, there are 15 million students in the United States higher education system. Nearly half, so 7 million, are Pell eligible, which means that their family income is less than or equivalent to $40,000 a year. We've also learned that 40% of college and university students are either food or housing insecure. Some recent Pew research has basically shown that 1/4 of adults with lower income, so basically those that would meet the eligibility standards for Pell, don't have a smartphone. 40% don't have broadband. 40% don't own a computer. And one of the things that we've learned through the pandemic is 34% of those had trouble paying for their internet during the pandemic. So there's a saying that you never miss the opportunity provided by a crisis. And one of the things that COVID has really sort of forced upon, colleges and universities is a bit of a transformation in how they deliver courses to their constituents. And so this is a new business model. And so one of the things we're particularly excited to talk about today is these new business models. So I'd like to introduce sort of our guest for today. Dr. Ann Clancy is my colleague at T-Mobile. Has spent a good amount of time in higher education and really has a lot to bring to this conversation from her years at City Colleges of Chicago. Next is Andrea Nelson, basically Regional Senior Partnership Manager for Western Governors University. And last and certainly not least, Dr. Michael Torrance, the president of Motlow State Community College. So very happy to have you all here. Thank you so much and looking forward to today's conversation. Over to you, Ann.
Thank you, Michael. And welcome all of the participants and attendees here today. We're excited to have this conversation with you all. And I just wanted to highlight, that this truly is a conversation. So my goal here is to pose some questions with our partners, Andrea and Michael, and so that you all can learn from the success of what Western Governors University and Motlow State Community College have done to expand enrollment and retention through connectivity and some of the other strategies that they've had with connected devices for their students. So thanks again, Andrea and Michael, for joining us today. And I'd like for you to just start out to tell us a little bit about yourselves, what your role is in the institutions, a little bit about your institutions that you work with and the students that you serve. Please, Michael?
Thank you, Ann. And welcome to everyone on the call. I'm Michael Torrance. Motlow State Community College is located in southern Middle Tennessee, 11 counties, 4,500 square miles. And we have the great opportunity to serve not only micro metro, but a lot of rural students in between Rutherford County, Tennessee, and the Alabama border, having reciprocity agreements with Madison County in Alabama. So we have hills and hollers, lakes and rivers, as well as lots of tall buildings. So we see a large swath of students. Demography is broken down largely traditional age students, but ethnically broken down. Our students are Black, white, Hispanic, or also Latinx, as well as Middle Eastern, and a small African contingent of students who triculate over from Nashville or Davidson County.
Thank you, Michael. Andrea, would you tell us a little bit about you and your institution?
Sure. So I'm so happy to be here. Thank you. And I know some of you may have noticed that Dr. Tanya Drake, our regional vice president, was slotted to be here. And I'm here to report COVID is still a very real thing. And so she is home getting better. And I'm happy to slide into this seat today. So thanks for having me. I am a regional partnership manager for WGU. And what that means is we work very intentionally with corporate partners to ensure that our curriculum is meeting the needs of the workforce. So WGU is celebrating its 25th anniversary this year. We're an online nonprofit university that hosts students nationwide. I think the last I looked, we have almost 140,000 students currently enrolled, and we're proud to have over 250,000 alumni. We really focus on affordability and, like I mentioned, industry demanded curriculum. So we offer 60-degree programs in business, IT, health professions, and education, or helping teachers get ready for the classroom. And our average student is 37 years old. So we focus on the working adult and helping them in their career trajectory.
Wonderful. So we have two institutions that are really geared towards helping students level up to achieve their goals. A community college, right, which could either be workforce attainment or degree, transfer for degree completion. And then we have an institution that's primarily based for career attainment, upskilling, leveling up, right, for working adults. So awesome populations, a little bit different in the institutions and in how you serve your students. And so it's really nice to see sort of the different perspectives that you two bring to some of the questions that I'm going to pose here. So both of you in your institutions partnered with T-Mobile for student connectivity. So when you did this, what was the problem that you were solving for regarding connectivity, and how did you solve it? Andrea, do you want to go first?
Happy to. So taking into consideration the fact that WGU was designed and built to serve working adults, and we've learned that 70% of our population fall into the underserved categories of demographics. And so looking at our students first, right? When the pandemic hit and we realized that connectivity may be an issue, some of our students were probably previously logging on at work or at libraries, things of that nature. And now they were depending upon connectivity at home, which they didn't necessarily have. And so we've looked first internally to help our currently enrolled students and quickly open up that opportunity for an online access scholarship that's purely needs-based for incoming students as well. So that's when we reached out to T-Mobile, as you mentioned, and started this partnership to deliver devices and connectivity.
And what is the scope of that, Andrea? How does that look like? What is the devices? What is the connectivity? What does that look and feel like?
So many of our students simply need a hotspot. They've got a computer, they've got everything else they need. And what's magical about that is it's not just our student, it's everyone in the household that is now connected. So we're you know, there's a great ripple effect there. Other students need a Wi-Fi enabled laptop, and so we provide that again on a needs base. And we never want a student to have to choose between keeping the lights on or paying for Wi-Fi, going to school, not going to school, those kind of things. So whatever we can do to help support our students and our incoming students. Currently, out of about the 3,000 devices that have been distributed in this program since late 2020, 65% were our current students that we served, right? And then the remaining 35 were incoming. This next fiscal year in July, we're able to shift that focus primarily to incoming students because we've shored up our current students' needs.
Wonderful. Thank you, Andrea. Dr. Torrance, would you share a little bit about the problem that you were solving regarding connectivity and how you solved it at Motlow, please?
Sure. I mean, the idea was to put a connectivity opportunity in every student's hands, and we went above and beyond that by looking at a device that's a tool. And I think that it's important for context for those listeners that a cell phone or a tablet is not just for playing games and being on Facebook and Instagram and giving it to your children to play Roblox. It is also a tool for education and to advance equity, closing the gap. So literally, we wanted to solve for closing digital equity gaps in the hollows and hills in our service area. So we went to the idea of the hotspot, and then 5G enabled devices were just becoming available. And so our idea was, let's go beyond that, and working with a good colleague at T-Mobile, Matt. We moved beyond the idea of the hotspot to include, well, what else could we provide as a almost wraparound services for students? So it went to a device, i.e. an enabled phone that provided free 5G, free 5G hotspot, free online talk, and free text available to students. Now, there were unintended opportunities that came from it. We didn't think that, we didn't think about the students' families. We didn't think about their ability to collaborate and engage with each other on buses to sporting events or from different campuses, because we have 6 campus locations across the 11 county service area. So students started to cohabitate in this virtual space to teach each other, to learn with each other, to train with each other. And so we solved that issue of connectivity by providing those devices, roughly 2,200 devices, about 30% of our 2019 enrollment for the fall. And we were able to disperse probably 70% of those devices to students, because we live in a place where students were actually begging the question, this is too good to be true. They're just going to give us these devices? And the answer is yes. We look at the tools and devices in the same way that we once looked at making sure that we had our textbooks on day one. I think it's important that services that support healthcare, homelessness, and hunger were also applications that we put on that device. as well as a mental health approach to an application like Calm. So for those who needed that type of um, de-stressor, they had that availability right in the palms of their hand for them to use. And we have great data points. We built a data dashboard for this so that we could show not only to our internal constituent groups, faculty, staff, students, administration, but also to the Tennessee Board of Regents, as well as our trustees and those who will look to philanthropically further support this effort. It has been successful. We saw 6 percentage points increases for African American male students. We saw 6 percentage points increases in retention and persistence for students who were learning support. So these are just some of the metrics, and I'm sure that when we get to more of the questions, we'll just share some others.
Thanks, Dr. Torrance. You mentioned two things that I'd like to tease out a little bit. So you mentioned you wanted 5G connectivity for your students, right?
Absolutely.
I think that's one piece I'd like you to elaborate on a little bit. And was there a significance in the collaboration with the hotspot or the device or both?
Okay, so the reason for the 5G is that as the evolution of how you teach, innovate, train, and learn, or transition students, higher education is in a great flux. Usually when you think of flux, you think of something terrible. It's not terrible. It's a great thing. We are evolving into a new meta space or metascape where 5G is the baseline for the reiteration of 6G and 7G and so on and so forth. So this allows personal sovereignty with Web3. This allows our students to advance themselves into that metaverse or omniverse or pluriverse space that we're starting to talk about. And it's not just for playing games. This is for integrated, simulated training. This is, and that's very important to all institutions of higher education, because the point is to prepare someone for employment, not to keep them at your institutions forever. So this ideology of creating a space that represents online as well as indoor training facilities. The military has been doing it for decades. And now we'll see automation and advanced robotics and those things taking shape in this as well. The other component about the second part of the question, the reason that it's both, it's both because they are synonymous with each other now. It's not separate anymore. It's like saying that a technical college and a community college and a university are all separate. We're not separate. We're synonymous. One supports the other. And it's the reason that this ecosystem between T-Mobile, Western Governors, and Motlow State works, because we're all partners in the first place.
Thank you for that. This is something that we didn't necessarily talk about discussing, but Andrea and Dr. Torrance, I'm curious about, do you think that providing this kind of connectivity and particularly devices that also touch families, right, to bring people together, how do you think that improves or affects literacy or digital capital to your students and their families?
Andrew, I'm Southern, so you go first.
Oh, thank you. Well, we've definitely seen, like, if you just take a family example of mom and dad used to go out to work, kids got on the bus and went to school. Now everybody's hanging around one dining room table, vying for sometimes one computer to do 2 jobs, and how many classroom assignments, for your children. And as parents, you're now the teacher as well, of being an employee and a student yourself in our scenario, right? And so watching how connectivity and having our student have their own device now alleviated that burden of just, take a number, tell your teacher, take a number, you can't do your assignment till my work's done, that kind of thing. I think helped, and it was truly, we witnessed how both kids and parents got to bring home they were at home with their work, learning from each other simultaneously, right? It was as if you could really, you didn't have to talk about it over dinner. What'd you learn in school today? You witnessed it around the same dining room table. And so I think just that vicinity of sharing space has created a lot of learning and opportunity to share and grow from each other. I know each of our students have a student mentor that touches base with them each and every week. And I heard over and over again how those mentors were doing more than mentoring the WGU student, but hey, I can give you a helpful hint to help that sixth grader with that math equation that I hear going on in the background. So I think there's just vicinity and collective impact of being in the same house, and of course having strong enough devices that had connectivity, right? Because a lot of our students are rural, and the T-Mobile devices, the 5G network reaches those areas where that might not have been the case previously. So I don't know, that's a long-winded answer to a big groundswell, I guess.
Yeah, so that I hear like increased collaboration and modeling, within the family structure and then extended to the mentors, which ultimately improves the trajectory of those family members, particularly or potentially for attending college where they may otherwise not have had the resources to do so.
Very succinct
Yeah.
conclusion, Anne.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
So communication for families, obviously collaboration for families. And then when we talk about what do families do, they ensure or shore up values, right? So to have a device that is smart, in some ways, again, one of those unintended consequences, it helped make the home a smarter home, which means that students were able to actually utilize tools, parents were able to utilize that hotspot space. And whether you like it or not, you had to be around the people that actually live in your house instead of everybody being off in their own corners. So I think that it's a value add in that effect on the communication component of it and the modeling for kids to see their parents working hard at something. It could have been school, but it could have been work. And to recognize the importance of if you sign up for something, you finish it, not just start it and stop in the middle of it. Another consequence that I've heard from parents that it allowed them in terms of the underlining affordability of a tool that was available for them where their kids could utilize that space as well. So it allowed everybody to be successful during a very, very stressful time. And we can't say enough about those things that I keep referencing as unintended consequences, because this forced alignment, it forced us to do something that we have moved away from as a society, to be in the same room, to have a conversation with the people that you live with. My kids in my house, they text each other and they're next door to each other or upstairs and downstairs from each other. So if I want to talk to my kids, I have to text them, "Hey, dinner's ready." Because if I yell if I yell upstairs, they don't answer. So it's been wonderful. It's been wonderful.
Thank you. And I think this is a question that a lot of our attendees are probably waiting for, and something that's really exciting. So can you share with me some of the outcomes, some of the data that you may have, and how has this impacted perhaps enrollment and definitely retention by connecting your students for student success? Dr. Torrance, since you're on my screen, can you go first? Because I also know that you have really compelling data to share.
Sure, and I mentioned some of it at the outset, and 6 seemed to be the magic number in terms of percentage points for us. We also saw a really fun number to say: 77.77% of the students who participated with the T-Mobile cohort, we saw them persist at a 2% higher rate. And so for all of those who are listening out there, the 75.38% of everyone else who persisted that were non-users of the devices, why is that 2% important, and why is that 6 percentage points important? Because every percent equals $200,000. And this is a university business conversation and talk. So it is important to point out that the bottom line is really important in the business function of this initiative. So the feel good and the great things about how it supports students is obvious. But as we get to why should we do it again, how can we expand it effectively, look at the retention and persistence rates of Motlow State as an example that we were able to recoup or see $1.2 million in either, I won't call it savings because the business people out there will say, hey, as usual, president doesn't know what he's talking about. That's not what we call it. But that 6% really equates to 1.2 million, and the 2% really equates to about 400,000.
You know, like a bird in the hand is better than two in the bush, right? So retention is something, and I'll share with the audience that when Dr. Torrance, when you shared with me the initial data, after you gave the students the connected phone, the 5G phone with the resources, and I think that's something I'd like to tease out a little bit more too, is the resources that you were providing the students on the connected device, the retention increased. And you broke it down by cohort, you broke it down by demographics. But when I was serving in the provost seat at City Colleges of Chicago, we would move mountains to improve our retention by 0.5% term to term. I mean, we did all of the best practices and all of the high impact practices for advising and student support, wraparound services, and all of those things. And we would have a party if we got to a 0.6% retention. And when you shared with me that you were able to increase retention by up to 6% in some of these cohorts, I literally started crying because that is so huge, especially in the community college setting. And I'd like for you to share a little bit about the resources, and if you know what those resources were and how the students used them, because I think this is an important piece about your philosophy about meeting students where they are, and what you are willing to do as a leader of the college, and how devoted your entire team is to providing the same sort of support for students.
Absolutely. And I have to begin with the team first. I'm just a talking head. I'm a part of the ball bearing and the hub that helped that wheel move. And it was the team, definitely, student success, our faculty, academic affairs, our support staff, the facilities and maintenance folks. Everyone was a part of this. And obviously, that's when things work at institutions and organizations, when everyone has a piece of it, because it moved from buy-in to be believing in it. We needed to meet the students where they were, not simply think that just because they were coming to us and utilizing our online platforms for teaching, innovation, learning, and training, but they needed to know that someone cared about them. And our care was in the form of connectivity and connected devices. The other component of this is what resources were necessary for the mental health, the hunger, I need a place to sleep. Um, I need to feel good about myself. Is there an online counseling? How do I have access to the services that are available at our institution through the insurance providers that we have? And although that sounds really granular, that's where our students are still today, and that's where they were, but in much more dire circumstances because we're still solving for X. We didn't know, and we still don't know really the long-term impacts of this other than the conversations that lots of us like to have about enrollment. If we were only focused on enrollment, this doesn't make sense. We were focused on the health and well-being of our students. So the applications that were put on those devices, it tied directly to the learner management system. So that on day one, students could actually access their content and get after it in the classroom. So we attempted to do what Tinto espouses and what other student affairs professionals espouse. You have to make sure that you're taking care of the whole human, the whole person, and not just taking care of one particular area of their needs.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. Andrea, I'm sure that you have some outcomes and some data that you'd like to share that you have from providing this connectivity for students as well.
Yeah. So I think I mentioned, like, we started this endeavor, we call it our Online Access Scholarship, First of all, there had to be funds raised to do it. We're a nonprofit. And so $1 million was raised to launch this program in late 2020. So as of November of 2020 to today, we have roughly 3,000 devices out and students who have received the online access scholarship. And I'm pleased to report that 9% of those have already graduated. So that's great. And then that helps recycle devices for new students, right? Incoming students. We have 64% of those folks who are still active students, and 22% have dropped for some reason or another, which is slightly less of an average than our larger student body who didn't receive the online access scholarship. And 6% have still not quite started. So they've received the scholarship and they're waiting for their start date, which at WGU is the first of every month. So I'm hoping that all 6% of those are planning to start July 1st. But sometimes life gets in the way, and if that happens, then there's August 1st to start. So to Michael's point and supporting the student holistically, that is truly how WGU was built, and we're built that way for every student. We put the student at the center, and we have mentors, we have labs and tutor services, we have mental health insurance provided for them and access to that. Specifically with our online access scholarship recipients, I am just, it's been a thing of beauty how T-Mobile has stepped in to be that tech support for those students and alleviated that from our university, because then that allows us to support them in other areas. And so this partnership with T-Mobile has been so helpful in that space.
Thank you, both Andrea and Michael. I think, you know, what sets you apart in this and in a lot of colleges is that you truly are meeting the student where they're at. You're not expecting them to be where you are as a college or university. You want to be student ready. You want to be ready for them. And I hear that in your comments and your commitment to providing the resources that are necessary. And that's, I think, a huge driver in continuing to get students to want to come to your institution because they know you care. The culture of care is really evident in what you're saying and what you're doing. So I just want to applaud you for that, because in my previous role, and even in this role, as I work with many different colleges and universities, it's evident when that culture of care is on campus. You can feel it, you can hear it in the leaders, and you can feel it in the students because they know that they're supported. And so there's that extra confidence that they have, knowing that they're going to be okay, even if they have a hard time. Just in the language that you use, Andrea, says, you know, if they're not ready in July, it's okay because there's always August, right? We'll meet you where you are because life happens. And I think that when we think about enrollment and we think about today's student, I think it's so important to have that mindset. So I thank you for that. So moving on to thinking about, like, if there are others who were thinking about providing connected devices to students or looking at programs to be innovative in driving enrollment or retention, or even just improving the culture of care in your campus, what advice or guidance would you give others to get stakeholder input to thinking about these types of different innovative projects, connecting students, things like that? How did you go about doing this? How did you get buy-in in your institutions? How did you execute? Could you walk us through that a little bit? Andrea?
Yeah, I'm happy to. So, you know, it all started, our partnership with T-Mobile and this endeavor started, quite honestly, I was reading the news and I saw T-Mobile's Project 10 Million launch, where they are committed to providing devices to K-12 students, 10 million of them, right? And I thought, wow. First and foremost, I applaud the organization for taking on such an audacious task and goal. And secondly, I'm thrilled for those K-12 students, and I'm an advocate for higher ed students. And so I wanted to raise my hand and say, what about higher ed? And so I just reached out and asked that question, right? So I think to your specific question, Anne, it's like looking outside of the norm of what can we provide to other industries, to, you might not think of yourself as a similar other until you dive in. And then you learn that T-Mobile and WGU are even like on the same marketing pages or something. We won't rest, you won't stop, just it's hilarious, all the synergy that we've unearthed over the course of a couple of years.
The missions are aligned, right? The missions are aligned.
Right.
Yeah.
I think that's so important to identify. And then from there, it was truly an easy way for stakeholders, my internal stakeholders, to lean in because missions do align. It was comfortable space. We trusted that we were all moving in the same direction for similar reasons. And then to expand partnerships, to look to our community college transfer students and those partners of how can we collaborate and work together? Oh my gosh. Many of our community college partners hadn't done a real broad online course offering, but that's all we've ever done. And so how can we share our best practices and tools to help get people up to speed and, stay in the game when they're most needed? So it's such a intertwining of like-minded, intentional efforts that seem to just work.
It sounds like, Andrea, that Western Governors University is really rooted in developing partnerships to drive enrollment, to drive completion and success for students. And it's those partnerships in sort of being open to others, right, inputs, and sharing best practices with others that is helping to lead and drive. And that also helps stakeholders at your college or at your university understand and buy in because it's really rooted in the way WGU works. Is that a good summary?
Yes, I think that's a very good summary. Also we're very active in changing the educational industry as a whole as well. So, partnering with Western Governors Association for advocacy and change of in this topic, availability of Wi-Fi across our nation, the infrastructure of it. So it goes very deep.
It's interesting. I think we could have a whole nother discussion about what you want to change about the higher ed industry as a whole, but we'll move on because I'd like to hear what Dr. Torrance has to say about his advice and guidance. Thank you.
Most definitely.
Sure. I mean, great conversation, and I could just listen to both of you going back and forth about that one. I love that ping pong that we just heard. I would like to use trust, but I'm going to define it as transactional, relational, for underrepresented students to build trust. Okay, so just think of those letters and those words. And T-Mobile was the institution and organization that believed in a vision that got, some folks thought I was crazy. There were other groups that I attempted to work with on behalf of the college that didn't return the calls when we talked about, hey, we are trying to fill a gap and we know what that gap is. Here's what we'd like to do. So the story is a great story because it begins with the transaction. I was seeking a partner, and Matt Beagle answered the phone, and I said, "Well, bring your kids up." I didn't know that T-Mobile folks worked and lived in our service area, and he showed up to our campus with his kids, and we walked through the VR lab. We put his two boys in the VR headsets. There was a hospital visit that ensued because one of the children fell down the stairs, and it was like, "Oh my goodness, this guy's never going to talk to us again." But that's when it became relational because obviously we took the best care we could possibly take care of him, his children, and then we met his wife, and I was like, oh my goodness, she's going to kill us. But the representation of underrepresented students, that's something that we shared. We both valued supporting underrepresented students. And then we got to a level of trust that this wasn't a zany idea, that this was going to make a difference in a lot of students' success as we were attempting to power student success through this relationship. And I couldn't be more pleased with the outcomes. Was I nervous? Absolutely. So you know how they say you look great up top, but you're padding like heck up under the water. I felt like a swan, but I knew that the belief of buy-in and the guidance that we were receiving and support we're receiving from our librarian Sharon Edwards and faculty members like Ramona Shelton and people in our office of the presidents like um, uh, Brenda Cannon and Elisa Roebuck pushing this. And on top of that, my grandfather always said that your friends will show up for you on the week during the week of first week of school. Uh, T-Mobile as an organization and Clancy showed up. Tim Storr showed up. Carrie McElvin showed up. Michael, I don't know if they invited you or not. I'm sure you would have shown up too. But Matt Beagle showed up, and they brought associates with us to help our students understand what they were getting in their hands in those boxes, and collaborating with ideas about how should we share this out, what's going to be cool, and snap to attention to students as they open these boxes. So we shared a message from our office, from our institution, about here's what's in this box, here's why we're doing it, and we believe so much in you. We want you to have this for free for the year to support your academic progress. So it began with trust, with all of those words that I said before. And I can't thank you all enough.
Well, that means a lot. And I'd like to say that it wasn't easy for me personally to make a transition from working at a community college system that very much geared towards serving the underrepresented, the low resource students in such a deep way until I understood T-Mobile's mission, which was to really connect people to the world, help people achieve their goals. Connecting people who otherwise might not be connected, because this notion of digital literacy, of digital capital, like we have social capital, is so important in today's day and age. And it was that and the ability to touch so many students and work with so many institutions that I said, you know what, this might be something that personally and professionally, I think is really exciting to be able to take this little bit of work that I'm doing at city colleges and work with all these institutions who have the same belief. And we're so fortunate to be able to have partners like Western Governors and Motlow State, others. There's a handful of other colleges that have the same vision that you do to really meet students where they're at to make a difference. And I thank you for helping us see our vision and see our mission through, and doing it together with such great folks who really believe in this and believe in empowering students to help achieve their goals is really what makes this all worthwhile. So I want to thank you both so much for sharing this story. Is there anything else that you'd like to share before we start going into questions and answers?
Let's let these
Andrea?
folks get after us.
All right, perfect. So like you were saying, we've come to the Q&A portion of our webinar here today, where you can now send your questions in. So all of our speakers here, they can answer your questions live on the air. If you haven't already, you can send in your questions in writing, and you can do that by accessing the Q&A panel that we have right there on the bottom right-hand side of your screen. It's the option next to the chat button. If you can't see it, there should be 3 dots or an ellipses. It's next to the chat button. Then click on that, and that should bring you to the Q&A panel. All right, so Anne, it looks like this first question is for both Michael and Andrea in regard to their own experiences at Motlow State and Western Governors University. So I'll just ask that question that came in. So what is the most challenging dilemma each of you have faced, prior to moving in the direction of improving digital equity and access? Great question.
Andrea, I'm going to keep saying you first. Okay. Well, I'll
Go
go ahead
right
and jump
ahead,
in.
Michael. I'm thinking.
Okay. All right. I'll go ahead and jump in. I would say that um, the most pressing challenge is continuation. And when you know something's going to work in your bones and then you do it and then it works, you don't want to stop it. You want to continue to improve it. So, digital equity for us in Southern Middle Tennessee, as I've mentioned, is about those who live in the hollers and in the hills, in places where there literally was not connectivity. And the argument for a lot of our constituent groups, why are you going to put these devices in people's hands when there isn't connectivity in a place? We don't have the luxury of not meeting the demand or meeting a need. And we need to do everything that we can. So the challenge was convincing and then guiding people to this principle that everybody deserves to have access to connectivity. And it's immaterial if you live on a farm in the middle of Hohenwald, Tennessee, or Franklin, Tennessee, or wherever in Tennessee. That's immaterial. The point is to put the tool in your hands, and just like anyone else who is very, very creative or a design thinker, you will go to where you can utilize that device to the best of its ability to meet your needs. And so it's like I said, it's immaterial that there may be places that aren't connected, but the 5G in T-Mobile's connectivity space is so broad that really wasn't a bigger challenge. But the conversation around why do it, I just kept responding with, how can we not? So that was my biggest challenge, making sure that people were guided to the idea that this is so important that it's immaterial of where you are. We must do it.
Perfect. Thanks. Great answer. Andrea, do you want to add to that or?
Sure. So
Thanks.
once we got the idea to do it, honestly, our biggest challenge was how are we going to operationalize this with a very large student body and more applications coming on a daily basis? Like, how do we make sure this is handled equitably, right? And how do we, so that's why the scholarship was set up, because in order for students to apply for it, we could ask a whole lot of questions like we would in a scholarship, so that it could be purely needs-based, and we were then supporting the students with the most need. So our scholarships and financial aid team, of course, had to get ready for this. This was a big influx of applications, and I will thank Jane Byrne forever for her tenacity of just making it happen on an Excel spreadsheet, if that's how it had to happen to start, right? So it was not waiting for systems to be built, but rather building, Band-Aids and bubble gum and baling wire and figuring it out, and then building something that, is scalable. So that, and T-Mobile partnered with us on that, because, how are we going to track all this? How are we going to activate a device once it's in somebody's hands? How? And so I think that was probably one of the biggest hurdles. And I feel like we've got a good groove going now. And so now, as a nonprofit, it's sustainability. So how do we continue to showcase the worth and the ROI on this, so that that funding is a continuous stream, and that's happening. But it wasn't the easiest part.
Perfect. Thanks for that. Glad to hear it too. Now, before I get to my next questions that came in, just like to say we do still have time, plenty of time for the Q&A session. So if you haven't yet, please feel free to insert your questions in the Q&A panel, which you can access in the lower right-hand side of your screen. All right, so this next question, this one is for you, Michael, just because they're asking if does Motlow have any of the success data that you mentioned published anywhere, or that you can share in the chat, for example?
What kind of question is that? Absolutely, we have access to that data, and we would love to share that information with any and all who would like to have access to it. Um, what I need to double check, and I would prefer that folks just send me an email. I need to make sure that our data dashboard that we shared internally and the data dashboard that we share with our T-Mobile partners, that I'm not sharing any student information. I have to be conscious of that, but I'm happy to share that content. We also put together a zine, an online zine that we published and shared with T-Mobile and placed on LinkedIn, and I'm happy to share that with anybody who would like to have access to it. It really tells the story of what we did, why we did it, and moves through the components of teaching, innovation, learning, and training.
Perfect. Thank you. Yeah, we'll look for that. Next question looks like it's for both of you as well. So this person is asking, how do you see this program, at each of your institutions, growing and impacting even more students in the future? Another great question.
I'll take that one, Michael. I may have mentioned that our initial intent was to ensure that our currently enrolled student body was supported, and we feel like we have reached that goal. And so switching gears July 1st to really make this as an outreach tool and to continue to attract a very diverse population that sometimes maybe won't even think of applying to college because they don't have connectivity, right? And so, so developing efforts in order to reach those folks is how we see that evolving. And one of WGU's biggest strengths is our alumni. So we've got over 3,000 folks currently that have been a recipient of this scholarship and device, and they're talking. So we can count on that as well, and it's always our goal to give a student as they graduate something to share and to talk about with others. And so this is one of those elements.
Yeah, for us, it's going to be iterative. I have a BHAG, a big, hairy, audacious goal that between the 1st of July and the 6th of July, that we will utilize all of our existing networks from our trustees and our foundation board members, as well as our alumni groups, and then the best persons to talk about and talk to, the students that actually utilize the tools for connectivity and success so that they can share those stories. We want to make sure that we do this and we expand it to a scale that it impacts as many students as possible. So I'll posit this too. If we're going to do this, listen to the people that you're working with at T-Mobile, because I didn't. I was instructed and informed, hey, if you're going to do this, it should just be a part and parcel of, if imagine you just give a t-shirt away to a student or every student that starts with your school. This device is as powerful and as important as access to your network on the first day, access to your faculty on the first day. And when you can put all of it into a condensed space, and on day one, instead of week 8, where a lot of students have to finagle financial aid and other responsibilities, you're preparing them for success, empowering their success. So it should be something that's baked in to give to a student, no different than an ID or a lanyard. So that's my suggestion.
Perfect. Thank you, both of you, for that. So it looks like this next question is for you, Anne. I don't know if this is something you'll answer now or afterwards in writing, but one of our participants here was asking if you could share some of the names of other colleges or universities you've worked with, community colleges, after starting this T-Mobile program. Yeah, they're saying they're really interested in hearing more about other stories.
Yeah, absolutely. I can't publicly share without written permission of the colleges, but we certainly have other stories where we have worked with colleges and universities for student success and connectivity. So I'm happy to share this information privately after I get permission. There is one college that has a public press release that we worked with. Is Amarillo College in Texas. And Amarillo College was actually the recipient of one of the community college awards from the Aspen Institute. They're doing some really great work around student success as well. So Amarillo College is definitely one of them because we did a public press release with them. But I could certainly share some others pending approval from their folks to share.
All right, perfect. And I know us at UB will be sharing all of the questions with you at T-Mobile afterwards, so you can get in touch with these people privately afterwards as well.
Absolutely.
So it looks like we have time for one more question. And I believe this one, it can be for both of you, Michael or Andrea, but I think it might be for you, Andrea, because I remember it popping up when you were speaking. But we'll see. So this person is asking that at their institution, they do a broad online course offering, but students tend to drop these courses. So with that in mind, with what you're offering, like what do you do to make sure students move through the course successfully?
Yeah, I've briefly mentioned our mentor system. So each and every one of our students is attached to a mentor. The mentor themselves come from industry. So they haven't only worked in academia. They have actually, like if you're getting a BSN at WGU, Bachelor's in Nursing, you're speaking to someone who has worked in a hospital and been on a 12-hour shift, just like you're enduring. And they're there to help shepherd you, find resources for you, advocate for you, help you know it's time to take a break. Like it's okay. Work or family's in the way. They are truly your advocate. So I think that's probably one of the most powerful elements. But it's one of the elements. We are very intentional of creating a community of resources and care around each student. Even though we exist online, it really doesn't, you kind of forget you're online when you live and work at WGU. So that might be, financial aid or the faculty themselves. Very accessible. They have a schedule now button on their signature line. As easy as that to speak with your course instructor and learn tricks and tips to be successful. There's study groups. There's we even have in-person things. Post-COVID and pre-COVID, we're having in-person events where we call them community of scholars, and we'll just roll into town and invite both partner organizations that employ these students and their families to come hang out and get to know each other. So I think it's that human approach. It's you're never alone, and ensuring that feeling of support, as Michael's mentioned as well, if be it through an app or just the gift of a device, you're supported.
Perfect. Michael, I don't know if you want to give your last two thoughts on that before we close out.
I can't do any better than that. She used the magic four-letter word, care. I mean, that's what it comes down to. Supporting the students as they're prepared to do their best wherever they're coming to you from. That's a period after that.
Perfect. Yeah, definitely, for sure. So that's all we have time for our live Q&A right now. If there were any questions that we didn't get to today, then I'm sure that our partners at T-Mobile will be willing to get back to your questions individually after today's webinar. Actually, as I go through my closing slides in just a few moments, yeah, please feel free to continue submitting your questions if any do come to mind, and I'll make sure that they're sent over to T-Mobile so they can be answered at some point in the future. But first off, thank you again to all of our speakers for your time here today. And of course, thank you to T-Mobile for education. And to you, our audience, I would also like to thank you for joining us today. For those of you who particularly enjoyed what you saw, there are many more upcoming web seminars like this one that are provided by us here at University Business, which is the leader in editorial coverage of news, trends, and current issues in higher education. We have a wide range of readers who subscribe for free to us at UB, just like yourselves, and they stay up to date with us online through our newsletters and web seminars, just like this one. Also, if you would like to watch this web seminar again, or for those of you who believe that the solutions that you heard here would be helpful to your colleagues, which I'm sure that's the case, you will be pleased to know that our team at UB, we will be sending you an email at some point later tomorrow. And in that, there will be on-demand recording of this webinar, as well as a link to the slides and some additional resources. So with that, on behalf of UB, this is Stephen Blackburn. Thanks, everyone. Take care, be well, and stay safe. Thank you very much.